I'm joined today by Dick Wilkinson. Dick is a retired U.S. Army officer, NSA analyst, with 5 years as a cybersecurity lab director for the Secretary of Defense. He's also an internationally recognized cybersecurity leader and published author, as well as a member of the Forbes Technology Council. Dick, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Theo. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that warm introduction. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Dick, let's go ahead and jump in. The topic here is the DNA of a successful and modern cybersecurity awareness program. I think a good place for us to start. Can you walk us through a little bit of your career, both as a CTO and also a CISO, and share with us a little bit about the successful cybersecurity awareness programs you've implemented, seen, and been around? And then also maybe just a little bit about some of the cybersecurity awareness programs that you've seen or potentially implemented that have struggled a little bit, and talk about some of the trends that you've observed and what differentiated the two.
Sure. Well, I think, Theo, I'll definitely have to start with the latter part, which is unfortunately programs that struggle or that have not been as successful. And I take that position from being the person who's being trained or being told to be aware, being the employee or the staff member. I know that it's not an experience that most employees or staff members usually enjoy. If they're not technical in their normal duties, you show up and you say, hey, these things are important and these are these are critical to protect us. And they don't always relate to the regular staff members that are non-technicians. So unfortunately, that leads to cyber awareness programs that just fall flat. So I've seen that more, unfortunately, than I've seen programs succeed. And I think that leads to just sometimes resistance even from your staff to be on board with your other security policies. So the awareness program is really critical. It's kind of the first step in your engagement with your employees to make sure that they're going to be on board with what you're trying to achieve. What I've seen as far as successful programs and how employees will respond appropriately or positively to what you're hoping to achieve is when you can make that information relevant to them at whatever level they're at in your org chart or in your kind of food chain of your organization. You need to be able to craft the information or share what you need to teach them or make them aware of in something that's digestible or accessible to them. So the more that you can do to make it relevant to that level of employee or to the duties that they carry out in your organization, the more successful you're going to be. I really find that when you move away from generic and you move towards specific, that's when employees can grasp the information that you're giving them. It usually becomes less technical and more accessible when you talk directly to a staff member about, in our security program and in the policies that we have in place, this is your part, this is your responsibility, and when you do it well, this is how we're protected. If you can describe that all the way through, it doesn't matter the technical level of the employee, they'll be happy to support your program.
Amazing. And so a key theme of what you just shared with us is it sounds like shifting towards a much more specific security awareness program than a generic. I interpret that as you probably mean a blend of content, maybe role-based training, being able to cater to people's different skill sets, to their geographical location of where they're based, what their core job function is. Was there anything else you meant in regards to very specific and tailored security awareness as opposed to generic, or is that essentially what you had in mind?
Well, when I talk about generic, that's me describing some of the experiences I had that I didn't enjoy as an employee and that I know I didn't want to use when I was creating my own security programs as a leader. So I took those lessons of what did I not like when I was that staff member being asked to participate. And it was usually that generic nature. It was the content that was provided was not necessarily relevant to our organization. It was very generic about these are computers and computers are dangerous. Be careful. It had nothing to do with the industry or specifically the concerns that I had. And so moving away from that, just these very generic, passwords are important. Everyone, even, we all know. But to understand why having a strong password protects the information in my organization, just that next step is helpful to get the employee away from I'm watching a video that someone told me to watch to I'm learning information that's going to make me better at my job. So you have to shift away from that topical generic aspect and get it relevant to the user.
Absolutely. And when you make it, let's say a security leader goes through the process that you're describing, making a very tailored, very specific cybersecurity awareness program. What we see during the month of October is a really big push for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Organizations go above and beyond in many ways to implement or perhaps emphasize a cybersecurity awareness program. But what I often hear from security leaders is after Cybersecurity Awareness Month ends, after October finishes, adoption starts to disappear. How can we, as just a security community, try to maintain some of this excitement, some of this passion, some of this engagement into a security awareness program outside of October, right? Once November 1st rolls around, how can we maintain security awareness into everybody's core job?
Sure. I think that maybe this is my own observation, but I've only noticed the trend of companies or government organizations really using October as an awareness month. I see in the last couple of years, it's really picked up that more, I think, agencies and organizations are using this emphasis or adopting this time to put some focus on it. So this is still a new trend. This is fairly recent, that there's even a time when we're going to take some effort and kind of double down and teach people more. So just the fact that anyone is participating now is very encouraging. So I do want to say that. And anybody out there that's listening, I'm glad you're here. If October was what motivated you to pay attention to this topic, thank you. If you don't pay attention to it all the time, so I'll just say that on behalf of the industry. But I'll answer your question, Theo. The idea that October is just the time that we're going to focus on this. Yeah, that is not good. We have to be able to do this well beyond the boundaries of 1 month out of the year. Putting some emphasis and saying, let's draw your attention towards this, especially I think the timing was great because it's before the holiday season. It gives you an opportunity to make these lessons relevant to people outside of even the workplace, right? This is a time of year where even your local news is going to talk more about fraud. They're going to talk about scams online, and the lessons that you're going to give them to protect your workplace are actually going to be applicable to them as they go home and start to do online shopping. I promise you, I couldn't believe it when I heard this, but I would give out information in my last organization. People would take that home and actually show it to their family members and say, hey, this stuff's for real. Like, this is serious. And it went beyond the workplace because it was so relevant to them, and they knew they could put it in action even in their own lives. So the more you can kind of bring the information to the user and make it useful for them, they'll adopt it even in their personal, cyber hygiene. That's great. That means you're winning. And that's going to go way beyond those boundaries of October. So make these lessons relevant to them that say, this isn't just what you do at the workplace. This is something that can protect you everywhere online. This is something that can protect anyone online, not just our employees. That allows them to carry that thought beyond October. That allows them to apply it in other situations. And I think that gives you your staying power to the content that you've provided.
We've heard and seen the same things, Dick, what you just described. If organizations can contextualize and frame security awareness and just programs in general in the context of helping employees in their personal lives, helping them protect themselves, their own digital assets, help them protect their identity, help them protect and defend their children who are growing up in a very digitally connected world and how they can operate more safely online, potentially parents, cousins, grandparents. It's very powerful, right? It complements protecting the company, because if you're practicing those good habits at home and people feel empowered and educated to practice those good habits at home, it's a lot easier to then carry that over to the workplace, whether that's at home or in an office.
If you can internalize any one nugget out of your awareness program into an employee, you've succeeded, right? I mean, it's not just that superficial level of information. They've taken it and they've used it and they see the benefit. That's really the key, is that when they believe that there's benefit to these actions, they may seem arbitrary. You're asking me to make my password longer. Why? That doesn't make sense to me. But when they understand the benefit of it, they'll follow through. And when they see the successful benefit of it, and as leaders, we have to give that feedback as well. You have to talk to them about how the program is going. You can't just show them the test and then not tell them what their score was. You can't just tell them to follow the rules and then never tell them that it's working. So there's another aspect there, is that the back end of this program, you make them aware of what they need to do. You also make them aware of how they're succeeding. The awareness doesn't end with education. The awareness continues with feedback. It continues with engagement. And that's another way where you can extend this way beyond October. Make October your education focus. bring in a new policy and issue it in October so everybody's focused on it, but then give feedback on it throughout the year. Wait a quarter and then give everybody in January, tell everybody, how's it going? And it reminds them of what they just heard. It reminds them that if there's some training out there that they need to complete, they're not going to wait all the way till September to go do it. They're going to spend some time now working on it. And you can spread that messaging out by giving feedback. So it's another great way to just keep your employees engaged.
Absolutely. And it's no secret, in addition to everything that you're describing, a successful security awareness program and a successful security strategy and program in general, it requires buy-in from the executive staff. It requires buy-in from the board. So thinking in the terms of sponsorship, if you're implementing a security awareness program, how do you go about getting that executive sponsorship and buy-in to maybe make some changes, to maybe invest in new tools, to really build something comprehensive that can leave a long-lasting behavior change?
Well, Theo, I think maybe the last time we talked, and I know I talk about this often, I'm one of the folks in the industry that says FUD, or fear, uncertainty, and doubt, is kind of the last tool in your toolbox that you usually want to pick up. Any security leader understands what it is and how to use it and how to motivate people with fear. That often is the tool that people reach for first. And when they're speaking to executives or the board, because they know it'll get to the point very quickly, I would caution against that. Don't reach for that tool first. It may be necessary. It may be that you try to explain what you need to make a purchase for a new program, and you can clearly outline the benefits. But if the executive or that board member is not motivated to be interested in security at all, you may still have to get their attention. And that is where fear, uncertainty, and doubt comes in. If you're going to go down that lane, though, don't just hand wave and say things are scary and terrible and something's on fire. You still have to make it relevant to that industry and to the organization that you're in. The feedback that you're giving to those executives and to the board members to say, look, people just like us who are spending money on these problems are still having issues. And I believe that it's because of awareness of their staff. I believe it's because they have not invested in making sure their employees understand what's required to succeed. And if you can shift that away from fear and shift it to, I've got a plan of action on how to do something about it, you're probably moving in the right direction for some buy-in. If you can avoid fear, uncertainty, and doubt and go straight to the aspect of, this is why it's important to our organization. This is a problem I see right now, or a gap. Don't say problem, say gap, or this is a risk, and use those kind of terms and explain the business impact to say, if we don't fix this, a breach will cost this much money. You didn't start with a scary story, but you're giving them a very scary outcome of what could really happen. And I think that's a fair way to describe it. Use information that's extremely relevant to your organization and show the outcomes that you expect from your program right up front. Don't hide any of that and try and make it measurable. And that'll put you on a good path to buy-in from your executives.
Excellent. And beyond just the executive team, sponsorship and support and buy-in from your cross-functional peers. So if you're a head of security and you want to implement a program, and you also want to make sure you're getting the support and the buy-in from the sales organization, you want to make sure you're getting that support from the marketing organization, customer support, every other business function across the business. What are some ways you can involve cross-functional leaders? Because if you're going to get great adoption, it's hard to just do that if it all falls on your shoulders. You want to leverage the relationships you have with your peers. What are some ways that you can do that?
Well, here's a good one. Your HR professional is probably pretty committed to protecting information that's in your organization. They've got all the PII, they've got personal records, they may have, quite a bit of sensitive data that's under their control. So meet with that HR person, right? It's head to head, meet with them, talk to them, talk about the sensitive information that they have, and talk to them about their risk within their own portion of the organization. And then use them to, ask them to be part of your evangelist team, to co-opt the message along with you, to say protecting employee records, which obviously every employee has given private information over to HR. So they're connected to that, right? So if the HR person is saying, help me help you by protecting your sensitive information, it's relevant to every single person in the organization. And so if you can co-opt your HR lead to be a security, I don't want to say mouthpiece, but evangelist for you, that's great. And of course, senior leadership buy-in is always effective to get a policy promoted. But when you can get that manager that's more of a direct supervisor for that staff to give information to their staff to say, when we're protecting this sensitive information, this is our responsibility, and they own it. Hearing that from someone other than you, it just makes it so much more impactful to the employees, especially if it's their manager at their department. So yeah, I encourage trying to co-opt your peers and your other kind of frontline managers to have that same level of buy-in. And you can do that by showing them they may not be aware of the sensitivity of the information they already have. So just a quick education piece with them will probably get them on board.
Just being on the front lines of these conversations every single day at Right Hand, I've noticed a trend here over the last majority of the last year or so. More and more organizations and CISOs and security leaders that we talk with, they're actually looping in these cross-functional leaders and peers pre-implementation, right? So it's actually part of the vetting process and discussion process of, getting HR to a seat at that conversation, getting the legal team a seat at that conversation, getting other cross-functional influencers who would play an active role in a security program success. I've found more and more organizations are introducing those individuals to the conversation, but before anything's even rolled out, before a single piece of content has ever been seen. And when you kind of think ahead of what effect that type of just cross-functional discussion, dialogue, and collaboration would have on a successful program, I would see it being extremely high, a huge impact, right?
Yeah, well, in the theme of your, the title of the session here is modern. And I think that is actually a key factor in what's the difference between a legacy program and a modern program. It's not necessarily technology. It's the fact that the organization has now embraced the importance of security. I think in your legacy program, security was always just stapled onto the side and saying, this is important, right? Most places didn't even have a security officer maybe 10 years ago. And they've only brought that level of leadership into the fold in the last few years. And so having to set the cultural tone for those leaders to bring those other peers on board, I think that's actually a defining factor of the difference between a legacy program that was very technology driven and just kind of beat you over the head with some training once a year, to a modern approach where it is much more administratively baked into everything in the organization. And the security officer can't be responsible for that modern framework. 100%. It has to have the participation of those other business leaders.
Absolutely. There's this ongoing shift happening in this industry where organizations are realizing that security awareness should no longer be treated as a check of the box exercise. Right. And when you look at why that started, why was security awareness a check of the box exercise? Look at our regulations, look at our certifications. If you read the regulations that say you need to do security awareness, it's literally a clause that will say deliver company-wide, executive-wide security awareness training. That's it. It could be as broad as a PowerPoint that you deliver on an all hands for 15 minutes. It could be a really comprehensive program and anything in between. But what had happened, because those regulations and all those certifications, ISO and SOC 2 and whatnot, a lot of organizations felt, well, let's check this box, let's get this done, and then we can move on to other matters. But what's been happening, and I think COVID accelerated a lot of this with the work remote and the flexibility work landscape, organizations are realizing the focus has to be around behavior change, right? How can we actually implement a culture of security, have something actually stick? And become operationalized into everybody's core job, because security is everybody's responsibility. And so with that shift towards behavior change, like you said, people are implementing their security awareness or their peers to the security team in the pre-implementation calls. They're getting that buy-in from the executives, and they're trying to build something much more comprehensive and built in the framework and the context of protecting individuals from home.
I think you hit on it there that I say early days, I mean, it still exists. The audit nature of security and the idea that it is a very expansive checklist that sometimes is very daunting. So every single thing on there becomes, you get a non-weighted approach. You get 100 things on a checklist and you treat every single one of them as equally important, right? Which isn't true. And the exercise becomes check all 100 boxes. And installing a firewall or changing a password policy is, you can check that block, and you can even probably check that block by yourself as a security officer. That block that's number 10, which is execute an awareness program, that's not just one block. You can't do just one thing and check that block and move on. It's got complexity and it's got weight that it probably needs a lot more attention. And that, again, is the shift that we're seeing now. Everyone understands that now. You can't just check that one block and move on and succeed. You can do it. You can pass an audit, but you're going to have problems. And I think enough people have suffered from those problems to understand the importance and to try and expand that block beyond just one check mark, but to an ongoing program that supports the objectives outside of an audit. Get outside of the audit mindset and get realistic objectives to succeed in your business plan, and how does security support that. Audit will take care of itself if you're driving the train that way.
Absolutely, Dick. Now, we've just got a couple minutes left. Let's say we've got some people here on this call that are aspiring to implement a security awareness program in the near future. Or let's say they want to implement their first security awareness program. The question here for you, Dick, is what advice would you give to a cybersecurity leader, a cybersecurity practitioner, an aspiring cybersecurity leader that wants to develop and implement a successful awareness program and just get started? What are those first couple of steps that they can take to ultimately get to what you had described as like the end goal for a successful security awareness program? How do you just get started with those first couple steps?
Okay. Well, I think the key phrases, the key term in this phrase is awareness. And so your goal, you're going to want to set your goal on what do I need to give to my employees or to my management team to make them aware of the threats that we face. So you're starting with what information do I need to deliver and what am I concerned about? So you're going to do some research about your organization, research about the industry that you're in, and understand the threats that face you. You're already taking a step away from a generic approach because you're making it specific to your industry and specific to the things that are trying to attack you or disrupt you right now. So start there, research, look at recent threats, look at recent agencies that are like you that have been compromised, look for breaches in the news and see what do you think you need to be doing. Was there any employee involvement in those, and try and use those as highlights that are relevant to your own staff. That will sometimes be viewed as a fear, uncertainty, and doubt measure. But if that's how you're starting your own research, is to just make sure you've got the most current information about your threat landscape, then that tells you what you need your employees to be aware of. So understand your own organization and your threat landscape first. That's step number one. Step number two is, if you're going to start to interact with employees at this phase, again, is moving away, or I guess making sure the content you have available is relevant to them. So you're not ready to talk to the customer or to the clients, the staff members yet. You've researched your industry, you've researched your threats, and now you've got to make sure you've got relevant content on hand to use, whether you have to create it or whether you have to source it from somewhere else. You've got to make sure that what you're going to talk to them about delivers the information that they need to be aware of. If you've got those elements together, you've done your research, you understand the focus of what you need, and you've got the right resources on hand, then you're ready to talk to your staff members. So do your homework first. Don't go out and pick content agnostic of your industry. Don't go out and look for a checklist that has nothing to do with your organization. It might be a good place to start, but it's not going to be completely relevant, and your employees are going to know that. They're going to feel like it falls flat, and it's going to turn them off from listening to what you have to say that next time. If you hand them a checklist that has nothing to do with their duties and say, tell me how well you do this, they don't believe you're putting any effort into it, and they're not going to be on board with your program. So the more you can show them that you're tuned into their needs and what their tasks are from day to day, the more accessible that the program is going to be, and they're actually going to take it to heart.
Amazing. Dick, we're right at time here, just a few more seconds. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today. That was very valuable insights on how to implement a successful program, the DNA of a successful and modern cybersecurity awareness program. Dick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Theo. Have a good rest of the day. I'll try and tune in. Thanks.
Thank you, Dick. Take care.